Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 5 o'clock somewhere in Napa Valley, California in the ToutSuite Social Club. I'm here with Delene Vollenweider, our co-host for the evening. I'm Susan Quinn from ToutSuite Social Club, and we have a really fun show for you tonight. If you like games, which I think the majority of people alive today do.
I grew up playing board games. That
Yeah?
was our weekend and puzzles on New Year's Eve. So board games and puzzles, yeah.
What did you do with the board game? You have all your cousins over?
All of my cousins played, and we each had our own piece that we fought for. And we each had real estate that we loved.
Oh, Monopoly in particular.
Absolutely,
Yes?
Monopoly
Okay.
in particular. And but we would utilize the money in other games as well because we like to bet, much against my Quaker grandmother's beliefs. But
it was Monopoly money. It's so pretty.
It wasn't real.
Yeah, I love the pretty colors.
Me too.
So tonight on our show, 5 o'clock somewhere, we are very happy to meet Phil Orbanes, who is the author of Monopoly, Money, and You. And we're going to get to Phil in just a minute. First, like we do every evening, we talk about the wine we are drinking. The wine in our glass tonight is the Priest Ranch Petite Syrah 2009, which has absolutely been just a joy to have in the studio this whole month.
Scrumptious.
Mm-hmm. And so you can get that at Summerston Wine Company, and it's summerstonwineco.com, I believe. Google it. Summerston Wine has a tasting room in Yountville, and they also have a really fantastic estate in eastern Napa on the way to Berryessa. You have to check it out.
I passed it today.
Oh, you did?
I did. I came up over, I avoided I-80 and came up past Lake Berryessa.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You have to go in there, check that place out. It is a working ranch. They have sheep. They have a Peruvian sheep driver, I would guess is the term.
Shepherd.
Yes. A shepherd, a sheep driver. Yeah, okay. Yes. He manages them.
Yes.
Shepherd.
The shepherd.
That's like too easy. So I spaced it. Anyway, they have a beautiful estate with rolling hills and beautiful tasting room, a lot of fun. So check it out. And let's see. I wanted to also say that we have been absolutely outraged by the Monsanto Protection Act. And so we have decided, this is the thing that Obama just signed the other night, and we were already outraged here in California. Phil, where are you actually?
I'm in Massachusetts, north of Boston, directly on the other side of the country.
You guys know what we're talking about our GMOs and our food. We just want to know what they are, when they are, and how we can avoid them if we choose to. I don't understand why anybody would not want to do that unless you're a big company. Like, yeah, but is there an actual person that doesn't want to know?
Some people
that
care.
work there, they still would really want to know. I think
it's kind of surprising how many people it's what is available. They just take what's available and they don't want to know. They just want their groceries, go home, cook it.
Ignorance is bliss.
So ignorance is bliss.
Absolutely, it is.
That's the attitude of a lot of people.
Very true. So we have just announced that we are having a Monsanto Smackdown show on April 26th. It's our Foodie Friday show, and we're bringing in some people from Food Democracy Now! And some people in the Napa Valley who are very passionate, and anyone can log in from around the country and around the world to put in your 2 cents, and we're trying to find someone who's actually on the side of Monsanto. So if you don't believe in what we're talking about here, if you're one of those ignorant people, you can go on.
That's going to invite them here, Susan,
If you think ignorance is bliss, maybe you shouldn't watch this show, really. Yeah. Anyway, so let's get into this book. So I have picked this up, and I found some very interesting chapters in it. I want to get straight to Phil, who is, now again, it's Phil Orbanes. He's the former vice president of research and development for Parker Brothers. Although I think, and we'll get, Phil, you had a dream of working in Monopoly when you were young. Is that right?
Oh, that's well put. The first time I played the game when I was 8 years old with my most favorite aunts and uncles who invited me to play, I was awed by first of all, the fact that they would want to include me. But when the game concluded, I realized that this game that I played was the first experience in my life where I actually held my own against them. I was certainly too small to run as fast as my uncles, and I certainly didn't have the knowledge of my aunts, but somehow playing Monopoly woke me up and made me realize, I'm going to grow up, it's going to be okay, and maybe I'll be as good as they are someday.
Awesome. That's so cool. And you're also a board game designer as well?
Yeah, I instinctively started inventing board games after getting excited about Monopoly, Clue, and a few other classic games. And I had the good fortune of getting into the game industry actually while I was in college, and I've been in the industry ever since. As you mentioned, I did become the head of R&D at Parker Brothers, and upon joining the firm, I was asked if I would represent Monopoly at U.S. and World Championships because they didn't have anyone in-house who really knew the game. So I made sure that I learned the game inside out so I could do a good job, thinking I would be doing it maybe once or twice. Well, all these years later, I'm still called upon to do it, and I love it.
Wow, what a great story about following your dream, right?
Absolutely.
So you can do anything. So the Monopoly is the world's most popular game. Can you tell us who invented it and why?
Well, the forerunner for Monopoly was actually invented by a political activist named Elizabeth McGee Phillips. No, it's a woman who invented it, not a man. And her game was popular among economic departments in certain universities across the country. Actually, not across the country, along the eastern seaboard and a bit in the Midwest. And eventually, I think students more so than professors found a way to smooth over the rough political spots, if you will, in her game and make it into something that was both fun and ruthless. And when it eventually reached a gentleman named Charles Darrow in Philadelphia in 1934, he realized that there was a commercial prospect for this game. And eventually he took the risk during the heart of the Depression when he was unemployed to begin making manufactured copies. It came to the attention of Parker Brothers the following year because of its great success in one city, Philadelphia. Parker Brothers then realized it could be popular across the country, and the rest is history.
Awesome.
Nice.
So the banker gives you, this is a question I've been dying to ask you. The banker gives you $1,500 to start.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I heard there's a significance to that. Can you explain that?
Certainly. In 1935, $1,500 was the average family's yearly income. And
wow.
And that, I think, is a very telling indicator of just how far we've progressed since that time. Of course, there's been a bit of inflation along the way. But, the average family had to get by on about $30 a week back then.
Wow. That's incredible. And they've never increased that over the years, have they?
No, and I think the reason for that is, first of all, a game is it's almost the equivalent of literacy in a language. If I understand the same language that you speak, we can communicate effortlessly. So if Monopoly is played the same way around the world with the same denominations and the same color scheme on the board, you could actually come across a player from China, maybe let's say Zaire, perhaps Hungary, none of whom spoke the same language except for Monopoly, because the game is the same everywhere, the values are the same, and you could immediately sit down and begin to play. So one of the values of not changing the numbers here or elsewhere is that sense of stability, and you can consider the $1,500 today to be $1.5 million if you want. You can really think of it just basically as an index as opposed to an absolute amount.
That's interesting. I had no idea that the denominations didn't change around the world, because with so many things, it goes to a different country. It's changed to to fit that country monetarily or to fit into the culture.
Yeah, the only thing that does change is the names on the properties are typically changed to streets in the capital city of the country, whether it's England, France, Germany, Australia, China, Japan. That's the only real difference. But the color scheme is the same. So I've noticed when I judge world championships, which is a high point for me because I regard Monopoly as a terrific diplomat that brings people together from all around the world with this one great thing in common. I've noticed that there's never any problem in adapting to the U.S. board, which is what we use in the world championships.
Sure.
Yes.
So you're bringing up the international aspect of Monopoly and its popularity around the world. Can you tell us why the Nazis hated it?
Well, the National Socialist Party regarded Monopoly as pure capitalism, propaganda, if you will, for capitalism. And when the game was published in Germany in 1936, this was at a time when Nazism and Hitlerism were fervently accepted, especially by the youth. And the Hitler youth, if you will, was asked to picket any store that carried the game. So the irony of it was that the picketing actually deterred sales, and a lot of games were still in the company's, the maker's warehouse when World War II began. And soon after the war began, accidentally, in a British bombing raid, the warehouse burnt down with all the Monopoly games inside. So very few of the German 1936 Monopoly games survive to this day, thanks to a British bomb.
Have you ever seen one?
Yes, I actually had the good fortune of finding, through a friend, a copy, which I've since donated to a game museum here in the States. So.
Oh, that's pretty interesting.
Yes, so I know that it's quite rare. But one of the things that I've always enjoyed about U.S. and World Monopoly Championships, it brings me in contact with the best players, and that is the catalyst for this, which is the third book that I've written on the subject of Monopoly. Monopoly, Money, and You shows this amazing parallel between the secrets of financial success that work in the game and how they provide a grounding for you to rely on when you want to make better financial decisions in real life. So I thank all of these great players over the years for opening my eyes to this, and then finally to be able to put it all together and present it to the public.
So you say in the book, I think there's a chapter or a passage that says playing it safe is a sure way to lose.
Yeah.
How do you apply that to Monopoly and to life?
Well, playing it safe in Monopoly means just keeping your cash, not taking a risk by buying property. But that's certain death in Monopoly, because unless you are earning income, which means taking money from your opponents through increasingly higher rents, they'll acquire the funds from you that they need to make you go bankrupt by building up a property group to, perhaps the 3-house level and forcing you to say goodbye to all your cash. So you need to put your money to work for you. Now, in Monopoly, of course, being a game that, has to have a clear beginning and an end, the investment experience is very intense. Within 30 minutes or something like that, you've got to start to build on a color group to have a hope of winning the game. In real life, you need to start investing on a more methodical basis, meaning as soon as you have more cash available in your bank account than you need for emergencies, the unexpected, you need to start to put that cash into higher earning investments that have long-term growth potential. Usually that means a mutual fund, perhaps some select stocks. As time goes on and you have a lot more money, it might be a real estate investment trust. It could even be real property. But the important thing that Monopoly teaches, and I've seen this so many times in games, is you need to keep a small reserve for expected setbacks. The rest of it needs to be invested aggressively so that you can achieve your goal. In Monopoly, the goal is to bankrupt every player. In real life, your goal is more than likely to be the amount of money you want accumulated in your investments when you retire. In other words, what's your financial goal in life? Is it $1 million? Perhaps it's $2 million. Maybe it's more than that. Well, how do you get there? Once you know what your goal is, and you know some of the principles that I outline in this book, you can begin to put together your own rules that you will follow to get to your goal.
Sounds strategic.
But fun. It's one thing that I like about Monopoly, too, is it can teach you so much, but because it's a game, and because games, good games, are fun, evoke a lot of conversation and a lot of discussion after they're over, the subject matter makes it easier to learn these principles to apply in real life. And I think that's maybe the most exciting thing that I've discovered about Monopoly in conjunction with real life strategy.
Awesome. So I haven't had the pleasure of reading the book yet, but I look forward to it. But I do have a question. There are multiple game pieces, and each person gets to pick their piece. Yeah. And I did kind of breeze through and said that I saw that there's something behind the piece that you choose. It says something about your personality. Yeah.
When I started to compile the research for my book 2 or 3 years ago, I organized a very large survey online among the millions of fans of Monopoly on Facebook, schools where Monopoly was used in the classroom, by the way, very successfully to teach math, game groups, and my company for the last 18 years is a firm named Winning Moves, which is affiliated with the makers of Monopoly, that's Hasbro. And if you notice the games over my shoulder here, those are 2 of the Monopoly versions that we sell. And we have a number of fans, if you will, that love the game. And so I was able to pool their opinions along with the millions of others from Facebook and ask them questions that were, some were easy, some were more intriguing. The easy question was, please tell me what your favorite token is. Please tell me what token you'd rather die than have to, select. And then I was able to put together a number of other questions that pertain to personality. Are you aggressive? Are you passive? Are you strategic? Do you believe more in luck and superstition? Do you regard yourself as fun or serious? Things of that nature. When all of the information came back and we compiled it, I was rather stunned, I guess you would say, to find that each of the little metal tokens in the game was associated with a different personality type. There are, the most popular token, for example, is the race car. The race car tends to be liked more by men than women. One of the main reasons given is because the race car is the only object that can really zoom around real streets. So a lot of players like the idea that it's a really logical form of transportation when you're going from street to street in a game like Monopoly. But race car players tend to be the most confident. They tend to be the ones who are the most enthusiastic deal makers. And
Phil, my brother.
Phil, which one are you?
Oh, they also tend to be very friendly. Well, okay. Now I'll tell you that I tend to use the thimble when I play, but it's strictly for tactical advantage, because in Monopoly, if you land on another player's property and you owe rent, you are not obligated to pay that rent. The player who you owe it to has to ask for it. And sometimes if there's a lot of banter going on in the game and players aren't paying attention, they won't notice a small token sitting on their space. And by the way, especially in tournament play, it is a no-no. It's unethical to point out to a player that a rent is due. You have to button your lips. And so I only do that because every now and then I get away rent-free. Otherwise, I'd be a race car. Now,
I always choose the thimble. I used to choose the iron sometimes.
I chose the horse.
The horse, of course.
The horse.
The horse and rider. Yeah, the horse. Now, the Scotty is the most popular token among females, and so is the horse and rider. The horse and rider, unfortunately, is no longer included in the version of the game that Hasbro makes. It is included in the one that's over this shoulder here. the classic Monopoly game that we offer through specialty retailing still has the horse and riders in it. I'm glad to hear you say that you like it.
I did. Yes, my grandmother always chose the thimble.
She's from Kentucky.
Well, you know, a thimble for little girls used to be a rite of passage. When you were old enough to learn to sew, to get your first thimble was quite a achievement. And I think that's one reason why the thimble is in the game.
I didn't think about that, but I have a silver thimble my grandmother gave to me because she was an avid sewer and seamstress, and I did a lot of needlework. And I can't use that thimble anymore. My fingers are gone, but I didn't even link those two together.
I'll just take a moment to tell you a charming, and no pun intended, little story about the early tokens and the thimble in particular. All the tokens are in Monopoly because of the recommendation of an 11-year-old girl and her friends who, when they were playing Charles Darrow handmade games, they used charms from their charm bracelets. So all of the tokens began as charms from a company in Chicago that made them out of die-cast metal. That's their origin. Now, when the thimble was first made for Parker Brothers, it had a charming little expression embossed on it, which was "for a good girl." And that was the thimble that you gave.
I didn't even know that.
I didn't either.
And
that was the symbol that you gave to, your little granddaughter in particular when she was ready to sew, because she was a good girl and she was ready to go. I almost missed the fact that they took that expression off of it. I think it was, not to be corny, but it was charming.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I was a collector of railroad properties. I don't know why I thought that you had a better chance. There was one on each side, and you had a better chance of landing on that and just collecting more rent. But I was big on that and collecting get out of jail for free cards.
Well, here's a couple of things to support your strategy. First, the railroads get landed on more than any other group. One reason is because there's more of them. And secondly, because there are cards that direct you to railroads. So the railroads are regarded in the game as cash cows. They produce a lot of income. Now, the other feature of the railroads that holds them back is you can't develop them. You can't build houses on them. So while it's great to have 3 or 4 railroads, if you can, you need to have a color group so you can build houses and hotels and get big rents, that deplete your opponent's cash. And it also helps to have a few other individual properties that prevent opponents from locking up those monopolies. Now, that teaches a very important lesson for real life, which is the need to diversify your investments. You put all your eggs in one basket, chances are you'll be the victim of a fad or a trend, even if you think it's the wisest thing at the moment. But if you diversify, if you have some investments that produce a steady stream of income, usually that means bonds or CDs, others that have big payoff potential, usually that means, growth stocks, for example, and maybe you also own a few defensive stocks or a few defensive investments that can withstand a downturn, you will probably get a better overall return over the years than if you simply try to put everything into one category. And going back to Monopoly, it's great to have some railroads, but you need color groups as well.
Super. Which color group is the biggest income producer?
Yeah, well, the answer is the oranges. Now, that at first glance may seem a little odd because the oranges are only the 4th group on the board, which means they're still relatively inexpensive. A lot of people naively think that the 2 groups on the 4th side of the board, the greens and the dark blues, Boardwalk and Park Place, are the richest and the best. But the problem with those 2 groups are they don't get landed on as much. And in fact, that means they don't pay off as often. The oranges get landed on the most. And can you guess why?
No.
Okay, well, the answer is because they lie immediately in front of jail. I mean, there's, when you go to jail, which happens often, you have to pass through the purple group and then the oranges. Now, the reason why the oranges are better is because of the odds of throwing any of the numbers on the dice from 2 to 12. The numbers 6, 7, 8 are most likely. And so the orange group gets landed on very often when players come out of jail.
Right.
They're also not an expensive group to develop. So that means if you can acquire the 3 oranges, houses are only $100. And the other secret in Monopoly is there is a terrific increase in rent income between having 2 houses on a property versus 3. It's huge. And I demonstrate this very graphically on a chart in my book so you can see just how dramatic it is. So if you have the oranges with 3 houses, you will probably drain so much cash from your opponents that even if they have other color groups, they will not be able to build houses because they'll be cash poor. And eventually you'll win.
Wow.
So, Phil, I noticed you have a glass of wine there, but I haven't seen you take a sip. So let's have a
It's a lovely rosé.
Cheers.
Cheers.
It's rosé? You're drinking rosé?
Yeah, my wife poured it for me.
How's the weather out there in Massachusetts tonight?
Well, let me give you a contrast. A year ago at this time, the temperature was 77. All this month, I think we've averaged maybe 40, 44, so we're about 30 degrees colder than last year. Now, it's more typical. We probably shouldn't be 77, but it's been a nasty winter here in the Northeast. I envy you out in the Napa Valley.
Well, it's only about maybe 70 today. You see the beautiful river looking right behind your screen there.
Could you box some of that up and send it to me?
Yes, absolutely. It's easier for you to come to Napa. Do you ever travel to California,
yes.
Napa?
Oh yeah, I've been to Napa on. I've had the good opportunity to travel, especially on behalf of Parker Brothers. California is a favorite of mine.
Awesome. Super. Well, come see us next time you're in Cali.
Social Club.
Well, if I can share wine in person with you, I certainly will. And even though I have been a little critical, let's say, of the weather here, I must tell you that in the summertime, the Boston area is beautiful.
I love Boston. Have you been to Boston?
I've been to Boston in the spring, and it was just brisk and light, and it was beautiful. I took the train up from Washington to Boston.
That's a nice trip.
That was beautiful. Awesome. It was very nice. And
we have a ice cream man outside, I think. In fact, I hear some music. So you also say in your book that there is a benefit to delayed gratification, and just to kind of wrap up the lessons in real life, can you explain that and how that applies?
Yeah, in Monopoly, the delayed gratification is your payoff, if you will, and it's also it's necessary for you to make investment choices early in the game that may not reap rewards for you until quite a bit later. But if the investment choices you've made are sound, which means you've gotten properties that get landed on more often, you've mothered your cash until you can build 3 houses, the odds favor you that you'll get the big rents that will help you to win the game. Now, in real life, delayed gratification means not investing for the quick kill, because more often than not, that will lose you money. Doing something impulsively you think is going to pay off tomorrow is probably not going to happen. But if you weather the storm, so to speak, and just keep putting money away on a regular basis, eventually history says you will come out well ahead. And I'll give you a great example. When we had the great recession in 2008 and 9 and 10, and the stock market in particular really came down hard in the early months of 2009, I knew a lot of people, myself included, who got very apprehensive and said, I'm not buying stocks. They're too volatile. Chances are they're going to go down. I'm just going to play it safe for a while. Well, a lot of my friends, especially at work, Winnie Moose, the company that I work for, said, you know what? You're probably right for a few months, but eventually I think we're going to get our money back. Well, what happened in the stock market today? First of all, it's only been 3 years or 4 years since 2009, but today the Standard & Poor's average set a new all-time high.
Yeah.
So that's delayed gratification. having taken the risk when things weren't good, knowing that we tend to right the ship and get better.
That's when we started our internet company during the recession.
Well, your timing, I know, must have been very dicey for you, but I bet you feel much better about it now.
Yes. I did it on purpose.
One other thing I wanted to mention about the book, because this I think is very important. A lot of what you learn about Monopoly is not just the numbers of making good investment decisions, but it's about the other N, which is negotiation. You know, Monopoly is a game of deal making. You need to convince your opponent to part with something that you need, and in return, you must give that opponent something that perhaps they, will benefit from. Negotiation and negotiation skill are usually critical to the game's success. I saw this as recently as the 2009 World Championship, where the ultimate winner looked like he was out of the game until he pulled off this wonderful sort of under-the-radar deal that won it for him. Well, my point is, if you know how to negotiate, and I've seen how the players the best players do this, it really helps you in your everyday life. In particular, because a good negotiator is true to themselves. You don't have to put on airs. You don't need to act like a salesman. You don't need to act in an unusual way. As long as you know the principles of good deal making, of treating your opponents with respect without giving in on what you really need, you'll find that you do much better at Monopoly and you do much better in real life. Right. And I've been able to crystallize all those secrets, if you will, in the book by having watched these great players.
Wow, that's awesome. How long does the game take normally, and how long would the game take if we were playing against you? Because I would be afraid to play. You'd probably be nice to us, right?
Well, let's put it this way. If you play Monopoly by the rules, as we do in tournaments, it's not unusual for it to be over within 90 minutes. If you put house rules into the game, and by the way, I have a whole chapter in this book that details every imaginable house rule. If you just want to have fun, you could spend hours playing the game. The reason is most house rules put unnecessary cash into play, and that's self-defeating, because the object is to defeat your opponents by bankrupting them. But if they constantly are getting more money by landing on free parking, for example, it takes a lot more time to bankrupt them. And there's one more feature I'll show you. I'm not sure if you can see this on camera, but all Monopoly games now come with something called the speed die.
Yeah.
And that's so cool. The speed die is actually a third special die that gets added to the play of the game. And what it does is it makes sure that the highs of play happen more quickly, and it gets rid of the lows. In other words, it gets properties distributed more quickly, and it gets rents paid more often toward the end. It's very clever the way it works. We use it in tournaments, and I can tell you the last World Championship was over in 44 minutes, and it was a terrific game.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's fast.
So is that one of the biggest changes? Because I'm pretty sure that the Monopoly game that I play on at home still with my nieces and nephews is from about 1968.
Yeah. Which would be closer to the game that it's hard for me to point correctly.
There it is.
This one is the classic edition that we make at Winnie Moves, and this one is probably more akin to the one you play from '68.
Now,
anyway,
I'm sorry.
The most current version that Hasbro produces, that you'll find in every store of consequence in America, includes the speed die, and it has for about the past 5 years. So it's really starting to catch on now.
And there's I've seen that have different local, like I think there was a San Francisco one. My daughter said she thought we had the San Francisco Monopoly.
Oh.
Have you seen that?
I have not.
Yeah. There's about 200 officially licensed versions of the game, and they are connected to towns, to schools, colleges, to states, to TV shows, to movies. Chances are, if you're a fan of almost any subject, there's a Monopoly version that you can put on your shelf and display with pride.
Wow, it's gotten much bigger than I thought.
I'm also still curious about one more part of history of Monopoly. The game's been around for 100 years or
Almost.
more.
Yeah, well, it's 77 years since Parker Brothers began to publish it, and it's 99 years since Elizabeth McGee Phillips originated the first idea.
So, I kind of picked up somewhere that there was a role the game played in World War II, helping British soldiers or pilots and getting out of trouble. Can you elaborate on that?
It's probably the most heroic and noble use of Monopoly in history. What happened was the British Secret Service came to the maker of Monopoly in the United Kingdom, a company named John Waddington, and after vetting them to make sure they had good security procedures, they said, we want you to make a small number of special Monopoly games that will be distributed to prisoner of war camps by the Red Cross. And in these games, we want to hide escape tools, a silk escape map, and real currency. So the way that they engineered this is in a sealed room inside the factory, skilled mechanics cut out openings in the cardboard of the game board, and low-profile tools were placed into those openings, and then the game board was finished. It was
like
wrapped.
compasses and things that they could use to escape and find their way back to safe territory.
Compasses, knives, files, and a silk escape map. Now, the reason why the map was silk was not just because it was waterproof, but because at night it didn't rustle. So if you were in the woods and you were looking at your map, you didn't make noise, which might have alerted, those who were searching for you. And then the other thing that was done is, depending on the country where the POW camp was located, real currency was placed under the game's money. So when these Monopoly games were delivered by the Red Cross,
this is so cool.
They got into the prisoner of war camps. The prisoners would open up the games, take out the escape tools, and I guess decide amongst them who was going to make a run for it. And the nice thing about the cash was, even though it was wartime and you were behind enemy lines, cash still spoke, volumes. So you could use the cash to buy a train ticket, perhaps, or you could bribe somebody to drive you to where a partisan would help you to get, back to England. And this project was kept so secretive that it wasn't revealed publicly until 1985. That's 40 years after the war. And we don't know for sure how many prisoners escaped successfully, but we do know that something like 25,000 prisoners got out of Europe, which is an amazing achievement, to cross bodies of water and get back to England. So Monopoly certainly played a role in a lot of these successful escapes.
That's amazing. And they
cheers to you guys. That's awesome. That's such a cool story.
That is so. How did they keep that so quiet until 1985?
First of all, the British Secret Service insisted that John Waddington only have a small number of people sworn to secrecy who were actually making these special editions in a locked room. When the war ended, all documents and all remaining samples were destroyed, so there was no evidence. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason they did that is because they didn't know if they would have to use this again. And sure enough, when the Cold War began, in the 1950s, they were prepared to use Monopoly in the event we went to war with Russia. Wow. And it was only when the Cold War was pretty much over that they decided that it was okay to reveal the secret because it wouldn't need to be used.
Incredible story.
I love that. Yeah.
Now we have something to tell people at our next wine tasting. Did you know?
Yes. Isn't that awesome? Now we know the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, the benefits of Monopoly are just totally unexpected, far-reaching, to say the least. Awesome. So speaking of that, there are still a lot of people that are playing games all the time, day and night around the world, mostly online now.
Yeah.
But Monopoly has stood the test of time for sure. If the most
any game that has required a significant quota of social face-to-face interaction, which Monopoly does because of the deal making, offers a fresh experience every time it's played, and it's not dependent on a particular year or a particular generation. The fact of the matter is that if you and I were together playing Monopoly right now, we would be having the same range of emotion that our parents had or our grandparents had, because we're human and we go through the same ups and downs based on how well or not well we're doing over the game board. So Monopoly is as current as the players who play it today.
DDA, is it okay if I tell what you did? Yeah. DDA in the back. I told him about the show tonight, and he said he's French. That's one thing. So I was gonna pretend to have his accent, but instead I'll just tell you he's French. He said, "Oh, Monopoly! I threw it in the fireplace." Because he was playing one night, apparently, once and only, and his friends were around the table and teasing him and like ganging up and taking advantage, because it is a very emotional game, as you mentioned. I remember feeling very emotional.
Yeah. Oh, I would get mad.
Yeah.
And I would get happy, and I would, we would all dance, and then we would all pound the table with our fists.
Yeah.
You're usually in a tough position if the others decide they want you to lose, and that's one of the knacks of a good negotiation talent is to prevent that situation from coming about.
Yeah, he threw the whole thing in the fireplace.
Well, he probably did the right thing under the circumstances. Terminate the experience.
I'm sure they were drinking wine with that game that night too. Yeah. So as far as the online and mobile gaming, what do you think is the future is gaming in general, and what are the changes you've seen, and where do you think we're going?
Well, games in general have always quickly gravitated to whatever new form of technology was cost effective and widely popular. There was a time when, for example, dice were made out of animal bones before the technique came to actually make the type of plastic dice that we know today. There was a time when there was no inexpensive plastic material to make games out of, but once plastic injection molding became commonplace, a whole new category of games emerged called action games, whether it was mousetrap or toss across, kerplunk, whatnot. And as soon as electronics became cost effective, games immediately became handheld or video cartridges. Well, now we have social media thanks to the internet, and games, of course, are wildly popular played online. But what I find to be most telling about the game industry is that with each successive wave of technology, the game market just morphs. It becomes a more multifaceted form of entertainment available in more forms. Now, yes, it does mean that certain types of board games become unattractive because they're not as fast moving, let's say, as an online game could be. So they go away. But each particular technology brings forth a play pattern that can't be replicated. So the game market just becomes more and more diverse with more options.
Right. Well, we have another gamer coming up in April, and I can't remember the date. It's a Tech Tuesday, maybe. Anyway, Jessica Ravello from Arcadian Games, she started her gaming company, which is unusual for a woman to be in a gaming, a very big success in online video games. And so she's coming on, and I would love for you to log in and be a guest that night too.
Sure, if at all possible, just send me the link and I'll be there.
All right.
That would
Time of
be
the day,
wonderful.
yeah.
She's going to be, I think she's logging in. I can't remember if she's coming to the studio or logging in. So we will, hopefully you'll be able to join us that night, Phil. And thank you so much.
I look forward to it.
Yeah,
Well,
this has
it's
been
a
great.
great pleasure. I've had so much fun tonight, and I've
Thank
enjoyed
you
my
very
walk
much.
as well.
Yeah.
Cheers.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for
Cheers.
joining 5 o'clock somewhere. You can tweet us at 5 o'clock or at ToutSocial, T-O-U-T social. Again, it's ToutSuite. We're in the social club with Delene Vollenweider, Susan Quinn, and our wonderful guest, Phil Orbanes. And don't forget to pick up the book. It's available on Amazon.
They have a great price for it, too.
And Monopoly, Money, and You. And it's not just how to win at Monopoly, but I think it's a fun way to teach your kids, your teenagers, and even younger, how to, invest and really have a concept of how to use your money and invest and say.
I still credit
I
the
know, I
game
lost
Monopoly for teaching me the power of money and the power of investment.
Yeah, it does.
Absolutely.
I have a little secret for your viewers. On Monday, April 1st, this game, Classic Monopoly, is going to be given away if you buy a copy of my book on Amazon. You'll get 2 for the price of one.
On April Fool's Day.
Yeah, this is what I'm told. I hope that I've got it straight, but I believe April 1st is a 2-for-1 on Amazon.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, DDA just said that's the full day.
Yes.
That's right. Well, that's when he can replace his game, the one that he threw in the fireplace, for free.
Hear that, DDA? He's replacing your game for free.
He's like, no, thank you. We'll bring him around. Now he can read the book and invite those same friends over because they were over last Saturday, his friends.
And we'll make sure there's no fireplace.
And we won't
to be
tell them
had.
about the show.
Yeah.
and we'll kick their asses.
Yes.
And it'll be awesome. So.
We have strategy
now. All right. Thank you so much, Phil. Good night, everybody. And we'll see you tomorrow night for Foodie Friday.
Good night.
Good night. Oh, that was fun. Thank you.
Oh, you got it. I hope to see you live in Napa.
Absolutely.
Sometime in the future. I'll make it a point if I get up to San Francisco in particular.
Yeah,
we're not far.
We're only like 45 minutes. We're on the southern end of downtown Napa.
Well, one of my good friends is an executive for the San Francisco Giants, and he lured me out to San Francisco